Jane and Eric had been looking forward to this camping trip for months. They'd been friends with Amy, Ben and Sarah for years, and they all had agreed that a weekend in the woods would be the perfect escape. The weather was crisp and clear, a perfect backdrop for what they thought would be a relaxing retreat into nature. The five of them piled into Eric's car, the trunk packed with tents, sleeping bags, and an array of camping supplies. The drive to the forest took a few hours, and along the way they joked about past trips, the laughs echoing through the car. Jane sat in the front passenger seat, occasionally pointing out interesting sights, while Eric drove, his mind lost in the smooth hum of the engine. Amy? Do you think it's too remote out there, Sarah? You're not afraid of a few trees, are you? Amy, I'm not afraid of trees, just things that might hide in them. Like bears? Amy, more like ghosts. The others laughed, but Jane felt a slight shiver run down her spine. The forest they were heading to was known for its beauty, but there were also rumours, whispers of strange happenings and mysterious disappearances over the years. She brushed it off, trying to focus on the present. By the time they arrived at the campsite, the sun was beginning to dip low on the horizon. The air was cool, and the forest was alive with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant bird calls. It felt peaceful, serene, and just a little bit eerie. Eric said, "Let's get the tent set up before it gets dark." Jane nodded, but as she began to unpack her things, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from the edge of the forest. The first night was uneventful, but there was something strange about the stillness in the woods. No animals stirred in the night, no crickets chirped, and the usual hum of the forest seemed oddly muted. They sat around the campfire, telling stories and roasting marshmallows. But the silence felt unnatural, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Jane said, "It's so quiet." Sarah added, "Yeah, it's creepy." Ben reassured them, "It's just the wilderness, guys. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. Not entirely. Jane couldn't shake the sense that something was out there, just beyond the reach of the firelight. She glanced at Eric, who seemed just as uneasy, his eyes darting to the shadows. Jane said, "Maybe we should go to bed." The others agreed, though none of them seemed particularly enthusiastic about it. They doused the campfire and retreated to their tents, but sleep didn't come easily. Every rustle of leaves outside seemed amplified. Every creak of the tent sounded like something, or someone, was moving in the dark. Around midnight, Jane was awoken by a sharp noise, a branch snapping, followed by the faintest whispering. She sat up in her sleeping bag, her heart pounding. She strained her ears, but the whispering was gone, replaced by an unsettling quiet. Jane called out, "Eric!" When she got no answer, she unzipped her tent just a little to peek outside. The fire was out, the campsite bathed in an eerie moonlight. The shadows of the trees seemed to loom closer, stretching unnaturally long. And then she saw it, movement at the edge of the clearing, where the trees met the darkness beyond. Something was standing there, watching them. Her breath caught in her throat as she quickly zipped the tent shut, her mind racing. Could it have been a person, or was it something else, something from the forest itself? The next morning, Jane tried to shake off the strange events of the night before. Everyone else seemed oblivious to the eerie stillness and the strange movement she had seen, and they quickly fell into their usual routine of hiking and fishing. But Jane couldn't focus. Her eyes kept darting to the forest's edge, and she noticed that Eric seemed distant too, his eyes scanning the woods as if he too was sensing something wrong. That afternoon, after a long hike, they returned to camp only to find that one of the tents, Ben and Sarah's, was missing. "Eric, what the hell?" Jane's stomach dropped. There were no signs of a struggle, but the tent was gone. It was as though it had simply vanished. "Amy, maybe they went off to explore." "Jane, they wouldn't have just left their stuff. "Eric, this isn't right. We should have never come out here." Ben tried to calm everyone down. "Ben, don't be dramatic, we're fine. Sarah just went for a walk or something." But Sarah was nowhere to be seen. Jane's nerves were on edge as they searched the campsite and surrounding area, but it was as if Sarah had disappeared into thin air. It was only when they gathered around the campfire that evening, still without Sarah, that Jane noticed something in the shadows. A faint figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching them with dark, empty eyes. That night, they couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The forest seemed to close in around them, and the whispering returned, louder now, as if the trees themselves were speaking. Jane lay awake in her tent, her heart hammering. She couldn't tell if she was imagining things, but the whispers felt close, too close. Then, without warning, a loud thump echoed from outside. It sounded like someone or something was pounding against the ground. "Eric, what was that, Jane?" "I don't know, but we need to get out of here." They decided to pack up and leave, but as they gathered their things, they found that the car keys were missing. Panic set in as they searched the campsite, but there was no sign of them. And that was when they heard it, a soft, mocking laugh drifting from the trees. "Eric, who's there?" A figure emerged from the shadows, its face obscured by the darkness. The figure stepped into the firelight, revealing a gaunt, pale face with hollow eyes. It was Sarah, or at least what had once been Sarah. Her clothes were torn, her hair wild, and her skin seemed to hang loosely from her bones, as though she had been dead for days. "Jane, Sarah, you shouldn't have come here." Eric grabbed Jane's hand, pulling her back as the creature lunged toward them. They sprinted toward the woods, the shadows following them, the whispers growing louder, closer. The trees seemed to move as if alive, their branches reaching out to grab them. They didn't stop running until they reached the main road, where a passing car finally gave them a lift back to town. As they sat in the back seat, panting and shaken, Jane couldn't help but glance back toward the forest. The shadows were still there, lurking just out of sight. And as the car drove away, she could have sworn she saw a figure standing at the edge of the trees, watching them leave. The whispers followed them, even as they made their way home. The end. Thank you for watching.